Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where tonight we'll have a wrap-up conversation with Most Worshipful Grandmaster Ed Woods of the Grand Lodge of Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com. Welcome back to the Working Tools Podcast. Tonight we have two of our hosts. The other two aren't able to join us this evening of other family obligations. Worship Brother Steve and Chung from Prince Charles Lodge, number 153 in Kelowna. I am Very Worshipful David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge in Auburn. And this evening we're joined again by Most Worshipful Ed Woods, the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Washington, as a follow-on conversation to his year that is just about to wrap up. And so welcome, Grandmaster. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate that. We know you just came from an event out in Friday Harbor, a really cool second degree. And I've not been able to attend that yet. It's something I've always wanted to do. But I don't know if you want to talk about that experience or some other experiences. One of the questions I was going to have was, what is if you can pick one or two or 10, what are your favorite kind of experiences that you had over your time as Grandmaster?
Well, today is on the list, for sure. I think this year, and it probably came late in the year, the DC trip that we went on, I think is pretty close to top of the list. And I think for me, being able to do some things like lay a wreath on George Washington's tomb is pretty, especially when we got there, we got lined up. We walked up and processed and kind of set up how we talked about, but they had opened the gate to his tomb. And that I was not expecting. I mean, it's not something obviously they do for the public, but I certainly had not been warned that was going to happen for me. So it was like they opened it up so I could step into the crypt and lay the wreath at the foot of his tomb. And that for me was, I had to take a few moments to kind of gather myself, before I turned around and then addressed the group that was standing outside. So that was probably, the top of my list. Secondarily to that, laying the wreath at the tomb of the unknown. Again, it's something that I'll probably never get to do in my life again. And then today was pretty awesome in that I'd been to the outdoor degree, but I guess getting to do some things as Grand Master makes it kind of cool too, because you get to be in a place that not everybody else is in. And like I told the brothers up there this weekend, I said, last time I was here, I was sitting down amongst the brothers, where you're all sitting, and for me to be up here is a pretty awesome deal. And so if anybody has ever been there, I think they would tell you that it can be somewhat breathtaking. The monument was built by a family, and he interspersed a lot of Masonic, what we call components, right? 3, 5, and 7 steps, and the pillars, and the broken pillar, and there's a table with the chairs, and so there's a lot of things that reference Masonry, but he was also trying to incorporate some other messages from things that he held close in his life. And I think what they told us was that every year, the people that own the property will close it down for one day every year so that the Masons can confer that second degree, which I think is a pretty special thing on top of that. And what I didn't know was that the candidates even get a medal that nobody else gets to wear. It's a medal with a white ribbon on it, indicating that they had received their second degree up there at Roach Harbor. So wow. pretty cool. When I think about the day and everything that was going on. So, and then obviously it's the fellowship that I've had the entire year. The being welcomed with open arms. The hospitality, the kindness, the generosity of the brethren can be a little overpowering. Even in my own lodge, it's one thing to go to my own lodge as the Grand Master, but again, the generosity that they extended, to help me out in my year is something I personally never expected. And I don't know how to describe it, but it was like, I guess as a member, I just kind of expect, treat me like a member, but it's for your own lodge to go out of the way and do some of the things that they did to make my year a little bit easier. I think is some of the things those are the moments and things that I remember. If I had to make a list, it'd be a pretty long one, because there was a lot of great things this year, I think, that are going to be special to me. So,
well, speaking of lists, you do actually make a list of all the things you went to and events and things like that. And so it'll be, have you started that, or does Clint Grant, their Grand Secretary, does he keep that list for you over the years? And so is it interesting to go back and look at that list and go, oh, wow, yeah, that's right.
So yeah, surprisingly, Clayton had a pretty comprehensive list of everything that I'd done this year. I took Google, because I use Google Calendar to keep all my meetings and things that I do. And what I was able to do, I'm a little bit familiar with technology enough to where I can say, okay, how do I get an Excel file out of this? Google itself does not make that easy. What you have to do is basically export it to Outlook. And then from Outlook, you can take it to a CSV file and then get a list. And then I was able to go through the list side by side with the one Clayton had. I think there was maybe like 5 things I had to add to his list. So he did a pretty good job of however they track it at the Grand Lodge office of keeping up with everything that I'd done. I had to go through and remove a few things because I had like all of my lodge meetings on there, all of my valley meetings. And obviously I didn't get to go to all of my lodge meetings or so I had to go through and take out the ones that I knew I wasn't at. But yeah, he did a pretty tremendous job of outlining that. I think there was 100 and can't remember what the final number was of just different things that I went and did. And of course, some of them were over multiple days. You go to Conference of Grand Masters, that's like a week-long event. You go to various Grand Lodges in other jurisdictions, and those are like anywhere between 2 and 3 days that you go. So not factoring all of that in, there was probably well over 200 things that I went and did. And I guess in my mind, I don't think that I really went out and did a lot of things, but people are always telling me that, man, you're just all over the place, based on, what I have on Facebook or what they see in the pictures on the Grand Lodge Facebook page. And I guess 200 out of 365 days is pretty good. I guess I got to have a little bit of time for myself. So, yeah, it's I think it can be eye-opening when you get done and close to the end of the year as to, how much travel did I actually go out and do. So,
but now for you to question that must mean that you were quite active before that, before you got into that chair anyways. So it doesn't seem like you're doing that much more, right?
Well, we had the 2 years of COVID. And so, the first year I made myself available, I traveled about as much as, the XCOM did going to the district meetings, because in this jurisdiction, you go around and that's what you do so that the brothers can meet you, get to know you, learn a little bit about you. And it's really to your advantage to take the time and do that. And it's important, I think, for them to have that information when they go to the annual communication to make that decision. For me, it's not being Grand Master. I think I said in the first couple of podcasts that we did at the early onset, right? Not something I had on my list to be when I became a Mason. I mean, it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, I want to be a Mason and also be the Grand Master. I mean, it doesn't, in my mind, work that way. And so when you do make that decision and you move forward with it, and, and then you start to travel, then it starts to set in a little bit about how much time is invested in this. I mean, there's a lot of things that I enjoy doing, that I have not had the time to go and do because my priority has been Grand Lodge or my wife. Right. I mean, and we've always had the agreement that, if there's something that is not on my calendar and she wants to go do something that day, then she trumps anything else that comes up. So yeah, it's important to get that out to the brethren for the whoever comes in as the junior grand warden this year. If you really want that brother at an event, especially when their year is grand master, you have to let them know that year immediately. Because the calendars, it's a little disheartening when you have to tell brothers, especially close to the end of the year, hey, can you come to this? Can you come to that? And I think I've made the attempt, as much as I can, to go to these places when asked, but there's just sometimes that you can't do it because you either run up against something else that you've agreed to do, or my wife, happened to pick that day and we're going to go do something. There was, I remember there was one day on my calendar, me and my daughter went to a concert, and that was something we had planned 2-3 years ago, to go to this concert. And it was on my calendar and I marked it as such, like, don't ask, so, but yeah, it's amazing when you think back of all of the things that I've been able to do and the places I've been able to go. So
do you find, because you're so busy, you're going to so many different places and you're around a lot, if you will, one of the things I've always wondered is, do people get a little bit complacent, like, oh, it's just the Grand Master? I mean, probably not, I'm guessing, but just curious about that angle.
Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint of do they not recognize the time involved?
No, it's more like hey, it's a big event for the Grand Master to come here, and so it should be important and really, for sure, get out to see, be part of it, whatever. And sometimes I wonder if, oh, he'll be at the next event, I'll just go see him then or something. I always wonder if, are we out there? Is it too much? Is it not enough? It's always interesting to see what people go to or don't go to, or how they can get. I understand the schedule fills up, and so you can't get to everything. But also, should it be? I mean, maybe should there be any limitation on it so that it's more people are drawn to events to see you? Or
I guess that maybe the best way to answer that is, this year, one of the things that I told everybody at my team meeting was, if you're not on my calendar already, because to be fair, anybody sent me anything, I printed it off. And if it had the same date as something else, I then numbered it 1, 2, and 3. And to the extent that I could, I tried to honor everything I could, especially as long as it wasn't be in Kennewick today and be over on the west side tomorrow.
Right.
Which, mind you, I did that twice. There were 2 events I actually did that because I backed myself into that, and so I had to kind of eat crow on that and say, okay, I'm going to do it. Right? It's not ideal, but I'm going to do it. But I tried to avoid that. But the other thing I did early on was I told people at the team meeting, I said, look, I said, I'm going to apologize now, and in part it was because of going through the pandemic and not having done things for a couple of years. But I told the brethren, I said, look, if you've got something that you are expecting a Grand Master to show up and you've gotten kind of lax about sending out a reminder or an invite, don't be surprised if I'm not there. And I think some of the brothers paid attention to that. So there were still a few that, well, are you coming to this? And it's like, coming to what? And it's, well, we've had every Grand Master since, the invention of bread come to this event. And, we haven't heard if you're coming. And it's like, did you send me an invitation? Well, no. And it's, there's this mindset out there where, yeah, it's been on the calendar, and we know that every year, the Grand Master comes to event X on this date. And so I let brothers know, I said, one, to be fair to the lodges out there that don't get the opportunity to have events and invite the Grand Master or the XCOM, I said, if you have not sent an invite, which I think is the courteous thing to do, whether it's something that's been done for 50 years or not, the courtesy is you send an invite. And if you haven't sent an invite and somebody else did, and it happens to be on a day where you're expecting me to show up, but you didn't send an invite, I apologize. But I kind of have to know these things. And I think what made it a little bit easy to do that was coming out of the pandemic, because Most Worshipful Cameron had kind of done the same thing his year. He said, if you're kind of expecting things to just fall in place because it's been that way every year, to be fair, it's probably not going to happen unless we get some kind of invite or notification to be there. And I think from that standpoint, people might think that, well, I'm going to see the Grand Master at this event, and he doesn't show up. And it's like, well, why didn't he show up? And so there might have been a few instances where people have had that thought, but I don't think it's something that's that I found a lot of. I mean, you'll find pockets of it. And I think where most of you see that maybe is for the brothers that have other concordant bodies that they attend. Because that seems to be a conflict with some of the events that normally take place where they would expect to be able to go and see the Grand Master. So yeah, it's, and I think Steve's doing the same thing this year. I think he made it, kind of clear that, don't expect us to show up if it's something that you've had on there. Please send us an invitation so that we can schedule it accordingly and respect everybody else that's out there that has something that they want to do.
A tip for the listeners, for the organizers in your lodge: your Grand Master is expected to have his calendar prepared before his installation. So if you want him at an event, scratches on his door when he's the deputy Grand Master, and make sure you get into that calendar. We have the same issue up here. Everybody assumes that, but it's always been that way. We've always done it that way. And we've always expected the Grand Master to be here. Right. And yeah, without an invite, it doesn't necessarily get put on the calendar.
Yeah. It's the, for most of I think the big difference too, at least in my mind, is probably over the last 3 years, most of the Grand Masters have been working stiffs to some degree. I think Chris had just retired. Cameron was still working and is still working now. I've been working and still working, and probably will continue to work for, at least another 10 years before I can even think about retiring. Steve I know he's retiring here soon, but he intends on continuing to work contract work. And so, Roger works, Jimmy works, so if you look at those that are coming up, to be Grand Master over the next couple of years, they're doing this working on top of, the time that they have to expend to meet the expectations of the fraternity. And it's a balancing act sometimes. I mean, the saving grace for me, I think, was that I had made the decision in 2017 to go to headquarters and work as a data analyst. And then when the pandemic hit, I got lucky again, because they were like, hey, you got a computer, that's all you really do. You can do that from your home, right? And then I had some supervisors that have been very gracious in that, if my home happens to be Kennewick over the next 3 days, do you have a problem with that? And the answer's always been, as long as you can get on a computer and do the work that you're expected to do, we don't have a problem with that. And so I've had that flexibility, and in a responsible way, I've done that to meet the expectations of both the fraternity and what I have to do for work. And it's, for me, it comes somewhat easy. I know I've had brothers say, man, when do you find the time to do anything? I have to think back when I was the master of my lodge, president of my shrine club. I was very active in the Valley for Scottish Rite, but I was also working on my bachelor's degree, through an online program. And so I obviously didn't know what the word no meant, and had conditioned myself to do, a lot of different things and balance that. So I think for having that experience, I think helped prepare me for for this year's Grand Master. Certainly, and in terms of being able to work, I try to get up to the Grand Lodge office once a week, and work in the Grand Master's office that's up there, and that's, I just do my normal day work, that I do for my occupation. And then when I have my periods of where I can take a break and my lunchtime, I spend that down in the Grand Secretary's office, doing a little bit of business up there for Grand Lodge. So it's worked out. So.
Excellent. That's great. So what do you think is going to be next for you?
Oh, it's, I want to get back to the Scottish Rite. I want to get tied back in with the Valley and get back to doing some of the things that I was doing there. I miss the Valley, and arguably that's probably been one area that I have not been able to spend a lot of time with this year. Equally, Shrine. I like clowning and doing the parades in the summertime. And, so my hope is to get back and do some of those things that I was doing before, get active in my Valley again. And to go back to doing some clowning with the Shrine. I mean, there's a clown college over in Spokane at the PNSA this year, and it's the ISCA, which is the International Shrine Clown Association, has finally gotten the idea that, hey, maybe if we put some clown colleges together to kind of help as we go to the different PNSAs across the country and teach the nobles, proper clowning. And that's something I've had good mentors in clowning from a Fifi Shrine, but I think it's going to be a great opportunity to get with some of the clowns from across the nation, and maybe pick up some tips and learn some things and hopefully get back into that, especially during the summer months. So, and then there's other things. I mean, we bought a camper, which we took this weekend over to San Juan. So I have an Opus Light, pop-up trailer. You pull it in, and I've got these little mechanized motor things that engage with the tires. And so I can turn it sideways in its slot with like a remote control. And then you push a button and it inflates and blows the thing up. Right. So it's like people kind of stand around because they're like, what is this? And then when you flip the top and hit the button and it starts inflating, it's like, they're like, ooh, but,
and then 20 Shrine clowns come out, right?
Yep, and then 20 clowns come out of the inside of it, right? But yeah, so we're looking forward to taking that out and doing some things, and I'll do travel still, with Grand Lodge events here and there. I think it's fair to say that most past Grand Masters are supposed to hang out in the shadows a little bit, right? And let the current Grand Master have his year. As Clint kind of puts it, past Grand Master PGM means power gone, man. So, yeah, you kind of have to take that in stride, and respectfully, you just kind of stay back a little bit because I think it's important not to be involved to a level to where you start overshadowing what the current Grand Master is doing. I think it's important. I think what most past masters do in our lodges is they go sit out in the Tyler's chair, right? It's spend a year outside of the lodge. I don't know that it needs to be to that extent. I mean, I think it's always good. I've always liked seeing the past master sitting up in the east or somewhere close to the current master, to kind of whisper that wise counsel when it's asked for. But I think that's the key, when it's asked for, and just outside of that, just find something constructive to do. And I think that I'll have some things. Steve's got me on a couple of committees that I think will keep me busy this next year, and will keep me engaged. And I think that's the important thing, is just to stay engaged, but also support him in the way that I can, but in the shadows, so to speak. So.
Well, it's a little bit different being past immediate past Grandmaster versus being an immediate past master, because you only meet officially once a year, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is kind of more of a shadows role unless you're asked for some guidance or something. So I imagine that that'll be a bit of a tougher transition. Mind you have all these other avenues that are seeking your attention, I'm sure. Right. So that'll be good.
Was there anything that you didn't get accomplished, maybe that you thought you would like to have got accomplished? I'm probably maybe a list, but I mean,
it's I think most grandmasters, at least for me, some of the things that I got accomplished. When you come in as junior grand warden, kind of the running joke is, you kind of sit back at the corner of the table and just kind of listen. And I think it's true to an extent. Not to say that the junior grand warden is silent in his entire year, but it is a year of learning and understanding what's going on. But the other thing that I was told was, be thinking about those things that you feel are important, and how those could be integrated, as you work through each of the years up until you're Grand Master. The fortunate thing is, I think over at least since I've been involved, and I know for several years before that, is that there's just been continuity and where we want the fraternity to go. And anything that any Grand Master has offered up has done nothing but, strengthen what the previous Grand Master has done. I know some of the resolutions that I have this year are things that I felt pretty strong about. And some of them actually came out of things that were just bad things that happened in our fraternity that I think we needed to address. It's disheartening to see some of the stuff take place, and because we don't have a rule in place necessarily, it just, those things just seem to kind of keep happening. And unfortunately, as a government employee, what I know about policy is that, policy never comes from anything good. Policy comes from, in many cases, things that have went sideways or gone wrong, in a way to correct or fix something. I don't like making rules just, for the sake of keeping things. But at a certain point, I think it's important that you do have to have some rules, or at least adjustments to like the code and things to keep things in a place as they should be. I mean, we've had lodges sell buildings, for example, for, pennies on the dollar. And it's disheartening to see beautiful lodge buildings go so cheaply, because the members are just, they're worn out, they're tired, and they just want out. Right. And so they kind of take the first opportunity that comes along. And so one of the pieces of legislation is that if you're going to sell a building, you need to consort with the finance committee. And it's more just to kind of so that they can ask the questions and have you thinking about those things, so that when it does come time to sell a building, you get the best price for it, or you're doing it for the right reasons. I think the other one that is really close to my heart is what does it mean to be in good standing? I have never felt that it was fair for somebody to withhold their dues until December 31st, but take part in all the business during the year. And then on the other side of that coin, if I want to go join another lodge, I cannot get a certificate of good standing unless I'm current in my dues. So it's like, so you're telling me I'm not allowed to even join to participate in another lodge without being in good standing, but I can still participate in all the business in my lodge without really being in good standing, And so I think that was, for me, I've always seen that as an oversight in our code, and hopefully we'll be able to at least clear that up a little bit, and make that, in what my mind is, the right thing to do, which is, if you want to participate in our fraternity, you got to pay your dues. That's part of the deal.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. Like I help our secretary collect dues every year, mostly because I'm the one who has everybody's phone numbers, and I'm really the communications guy. But I tell you that you're exactly right. They participate for half of the year without having paid their dues. That drives me nuts. It's coming. It's due every year. But I think we did a whole episode just on dues at one point, and so we won't really go there. But I see our time is wrapping up, and on this episode, if you have time to come back for another episode,
sure.
I've got a couple more questions we could throw at you, and
okay.
and that would be great. with that, I really like to thank everybody for listening. Of course, give us your comments in the comment section on all the podcast apps and especially on YouTube. And for now, on behalf of David and most worshipful brother Ed Woods and myself, we thank you for listening and hope you all have a fantastic evening.